Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to go a little deeper into the world of data. Most of you are already pretty familiar with databases and what they are, so we're going to skip those database 101 type topics and really look into keeping that data healthy and clean and useful. We're talking data governance and, more specifically, the key roles and responsibilities that make it all work.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, a lot of people think that data governance is just an IT thing. It's really not. It's a much broader, bigger picture kind of thing. And it really involves a bunch of different people across, the business side, IT, you name it.
So if we're thinking about building this team, this data governance team, where do we even start?
Well, just like any successful organization, you need a structure, right? And in data governance, we often think of this structure as a pyramid.
A pyramid. Okay.
Yeah.
So who's sitting at the top? Who's at the very peak of this data governance pyramid?
At the very top, you have the executive steering committee. These are the folks that are really setting the vision, driving the importance of data as a valuable asset for the whole organization. They're really spearheading that cultural shift towards good data governance.
So they're kind of like the board of directors for data, right? Setting the overall strategy, making sure everybody's on board with this whole idea of data governance.
Absolutely. Great analogy. Now, right below them, we have the data governance board. Think of these folks as the ones translating that high-level vision into an actual plan. They're making sure that, all those initiatives, those goals, everything is actually aligned with the overall business goals of the organization.
So they're the ones kind of bringing that vision into reality,
Yeah.
right? But who's really down there in the trenches doing that hands-on work with the data?
Well, that's where we get to the Data Stewardship Council. These are the boots on the ground. They're really responsible for implementing and maintaining data quality on a day-to-day basis.
The Data Stewardship Council. Okay, Tell me more about who's on this council, what they actually DO.
Well, you have two primary players. You have what we call data governors, and you have data stewards. Now, the data governors, they're really representing different parts of the business, right? They each have their own area of expertise. Think of them maybe like ministers in a government. Each one's responsible for their own specific department.
Okay, I like that. So the data stewards are kind of working within those departments.
Exactly. They're the ones that are ensuring that the data within their domain is accurate, that it's consistent, it's used correctly, and, that it adheres to any guidelines set forth by those data governors.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility. It really makes you think, what kind of person does it take to be a good data steward?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They need a very keen eye for detail. They need that passion for accuracy. They got to have that deep understanding of how data is actually used in their particular business function.
You mentioned making sure the data is used correctly. Can you give me a real-world example of maybe what could go wrong if you don't have those data stewards there doing that job?
Oh, absolutely. Let's say, for example, a company's sending out some kind of promotional material, to their customers, but maybe somebody missed a really critical data quality check. And instead of getting, a nice little dear so-and-so at, 123 Main Street, all of a sudden customers are getting mail addressed to dear customer name at invalid address.
That's not good. That does not look good. So data stewards would be the ones who are in there catching that kind of error before it actually gets sent out to a customer.
Absolutely. They would have made sure that those addresses were validated, that they were accurate, preventing a potentially really disastrous situation.
Okay, now their role is crystal clear to me. Now, we can't forget about IT support. Where do they fit into this whole picture, into this data governance world?
IT support is the backbone. These are the folks that are keeping the systems up and running. They're the ones supporting the data infrastructure. And really, they're providing that technical foundation for everything to actually work.
So without them, the data stewards, the data governors, wouldn't even have the tools to do their jobs, right?
Absolutely. It's a total team effort. Every role is absolutely crucial to ensure that data is treated as the valuable asset that it truly is.
You've painted a really great picture of how these different roles all kind of fit together, who's doing what. Now, I want to dive even deeper into those data stewards. What are their specific responsibilities?
Sure, they wear a lot of hats. So let's start by focusing on the business data steward.
Okay, that sounds good to me. So the business data steward, they're the ones who are kind of champions of data quality, right? What does that actually mean in practice?
In practice, it means that they are on the front lines, right? They're making sure that the data is accurate, it's consistent, and it's being used correctly for their specific area of the business. But they're not just passively checking boxes. They're actively involved in improving the data itself.
So if we go back to that mailing label example, they'd be the ones making sure that the names and addresses are all correct and formatted the right way.
Exactly. They're making sure that the data is fit for its intended purpose. And, they're not just cleaning up data, they're also defining key business terms. They're setting data quality metrics for their domain.
So they're kind of like the data dictionary writers, making sure everybody understands what the data means.
That's a great way to put it. They're establishing that shared understanding of the data, which is just critical for effective communication and for decision making.
This is already so insightful. I'm really starting to see how important this role is, like having a guardian angel for your data. But we've only scratched the surface, right?
Yeah.
What else do they do?
Well, one of the most important things they do is that they identify potential data quality issues before they become big problems. Remember we were talking about them being like detectives.
Yes, looking for inconsistencies, making sure everything's in order.
Right. They're monitoring that data, looking for any red flags, missing values, duplicate records, values that just don't make sense within the context of their business.
And then they raise the alarm if something seems off.
Exactly, because early detection is key. It's always easier to fix a problem at the root, rather than trying to deal with all the fallout of corrupted data down the line.
It really is like having a guardian angel. Now, what about those technical data stewards? How do they support all of this?
Well, the technical data steward is the technical backbone of the operation. Now, the business data steward understands the data from that business perspective, but they might not be so familiar with the actual systems and infrastructure where that data actually lives.
So they're like the engineers who are keeping the data flowing smoothly behind the scenes.
Perfect analogy, yeah. They have that deep technical knowledge that's needed to explain, those complex system issues. They got to make sure that data is flowing seamlessly between those different systems, keeping the pipelines from, springing leaks.
They sound indispensable.
Yeah.
Can you give us a real-world example of maybe how they might support these data governance efforts?
Absolutely. So let's say the business data steward notices there's like this sudden spike in sales for a particular product, right? But they have no idea why.
And that's where the technical data steward comes in.
You got it. They can actually go in, analyze the systems that are involved, pinpoint the source of that anomaly, and then explain why it's happening. Maybe there was a marketing campaign that kicked off. Maybe there was a pricing error. Maybe a competitor's product was suddenly unavailable. Whatever it is, the technical data steward can help figure that out.
So they're like the data whisperers.
Yeah.
They can decode those cryptic system messages and tell you what's really going on. And their understanding of the systems is just critical for keeping that data flowing, right?
Yes, absolutely. They also play a big role in identifying other data anomalies. They help develop data quality rules, and they work really closely with IT to actually implement those technical solutions that help maintain that data quality.
It's incredible how each of these roles has such a specific purpose. Like the business data stewards, they're the business savvy champions. And then the technical data stewards, they're the tech savvy guardians. And they work together to create this really powerful force for good data governance.
You got it. And they're each playing that vital role in ensuring that data is treated as a valuable asset, that it's used to inform decisions and ultimately drive business success.
This has been so insightful. You've given us a great overview of those key roles in data governance. But we're just getting started. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore even more fascinating insights about the roles to keep data flowing smoothly and reliably.
See them.
Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our deep dive into the world of data governance, and I'm really excited to go deeper into the different types of data stewards that we have. Last time, we were talking about those business data stewards and how important they are.
Absolutely. They're the bridge between what the business needs and what the data actually looks like.
Definitely. But we also started talking a little about the technical data steward, and you mentioned something about them being the tech-savvy guardian of data integrity.
Yeah, exactly. So while a business data steward understands data, from the business side of things, the technical data steward knows the systems, like inside and out, where that data lives, how it's structured, all that.
So they're the ones who can really explain what's happening like under the hood when it comes to the data.
Exactly. And one of their key roles is actually managing something called reference data.
Reference data. Remind me what that is again.
Okay, so think of it like the foundation of all your data. It's the data that really provides context and consistency for everything else. So things like country codes, product categories, or even those yes-mins indicators that you see in your databases.
Oh, right. It's like the data that defines the options, the categories, like the building blocks. Yeah.
Exactly, you got it. And the technical data steward is the one making sure that this reference data is accurate, it's consistent, and that it's used correctly across all the different systems in an organization.
So they're making sure that, even when it comes to those basic building blocks of data, everyone's kind of speaking the same data language.
Exactly. Like, let's say you have two systems. One system is for your sales data, another system's for your marketing data, and they both have something like a customer status field, right?
But what if active customer means something slightly different in each system?
That's where things can go wrong. That's where you need that technical data steward to come in and make sure that those values in that customer status field, that they're aligned across both systems. So everybody has that same understanding of what active customer means.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they're preventing these data mismatches that can cause a lot of confusion.
Exactly. Think of them like data diplomats going back and forth, making sure everyone's on the same page.
So they're not just fixing problems, they're actually preventing them from happening in the first place.
That's the key, that preventative approach.
And we also talked about how, data needs to flow smoothly between all these different systems. Do technical data stewards play a role in that as well?
Absolutely. Remember those data pipelines we talked about? They're the ones helping make sure that those pipelines are connected in the right way, that the data's flowing from, point A to point B without any hiccups.
So they're like the plumbers of the data world.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. They work closely with those IT folks to design and implement those data integration processes. So they're making sure that as data is moving from one system to another, it's transformed correctly, it's mapped the right way.
That is a huge responsibility. Sounds like they need to understand both sides of the coin, right? Like the business A&D, the technical stuff.
Absolutely. And that's what makes them such a valuable part of that data governance team.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces really fit together.
It's all about that teamwork.
Now, I want to go back to that reference data idea for a second. Can you give me a real-world example of how a technical data steward might go about making sure that reference data is consistent across different systems?
Sure. Let's say you have a company that sells products internationally. They're probably using a country code field in their database to track where those products are going, right?
Yeah. And I imagine they're probably using those standardized country codes, like, those two-letter abbreviations that you see at the Olympics.
Exactly. But what if one system is using US for the United States and another system uses USA?
I mean, it seems like a small thing, but I can see how that could cause problems if those systems need to share data.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's where that technical data steward will come in. They'd make sure all the systems are using that same standardized country code, in this case, US, and that prevents those mismatches from happening.
So they're really standardizing those small details, which can actually make a big difference in the end.
It's all about sweating the small stuff so you don't have to deal with the big stuff later.
Now, we've talked a lot about how technical data stewards work with the data itself. But do they play a role in supporting the people who are using the data?
Oh, definitely. That's a huge part of their job. Because remember, data is only really valuable if it's being used effectively, to make decisions, to take actions, to actually drive the business forward.
So they're not just guardians of the data, they're also advocates for its use.
Exactly. And that often means serving as a point of contact for data users within the organization. So, they're providing guidance, they're answering questions, they're making sure people understand how to access and how to use the data that they need.
So if I'm a marketing analyst and I have a question about how a particular metric is calculated, I could go to the technical data steward for an explanation.
Absolutely. They can give you those technical details, make sure you're interpreting the data in the right way.
That's great, like having a data expert on call.
And that's really what good data governance is all about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure everyone in the organization has the information they need to make those smart decisions.
And speaking of making decisions and driving the business forward, I'm curious about the role of the technical data steward in supporting those key business initiatives, things like data warehousing, business intelligence projects.
Yeah, absolutely. They're really important there. Remember how we talked about them making sure that data is flowing between systems, those data pipelines?
Yeah.
Well, those same skills are crucial when you're building a data warehouse, right?
Yeah.
They can help design those data models. They can define the rules for how that data is transformed, make sure everything is integrated correctly into the warehouse.
So they're kind of laying the foundation for a really strong data warehouse.
Exactly. And that foundation is so important because if the data in your warehouse isn't accurate, isn't consistent, then all those business intelligence tools you're using, they're not going to give you the insights that you need.
It's like trying to bake a cake with bad ingredients. You're not going to end up with a good cake.
Perfect analogy. The technical data steward makes sure that those ingredients are fresh, so your insights are delicious.
Love that analogy. But it's not just about building these systems, right? It's about supporting the people who are going to be using them.
Absolutely. And that often means providing training to those business intelligence analysts, helping them understand the data models, the different data sources, and just how to use those BI tools effectively.
So they're not just building the tools, they're actually teaching people how to use them to unlock that power of data.
Exactly. It's about empowerment.
This is incredible. Their expertise really touches so many different aspects of data governance.
Yeah. And they're often the unsung heroes, making
Yeah.
sure that data is not just accurate, but also accessible and usable.
And their collaboration with those business data stewards seems really important. Can you talk a little more about that?
Sure. Remember we were talking about how they work together to define data quality rules? The business data steward setting those business requirements, and the technical data steward translating that into those technical specifications.
Right.
Well, that same partnership happens in a lot of different areas, data governance. They're constantly communicating, sharing their knowledge, and just making sure that that data governance strategy is actually aligned with both the needs of the business and what's possible from a technical perspective.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like in the real world?
Sure. Let's say a company is launching a new product, and they want to track customer feedback about that product.
So the business data steward would be involved in defining, what customer feedback even means, right?
Exactly. Like, do we include online reviews? What about social media mentions? Do customer service interactions count as feedback?
And then the technical data steward would figure out, okay, how do we actually capture all of that? How do we store it in a way that's consistent and reliable?
You got it. They might recommend setting up a system to automatically pull in those social media mentions. Or maybe they work with the customer service team to make sure that all those interactions are being tagged and categorized correctly in their system.
So they're working together to make sure that data is collected in a way that makes sense for the business, but it's also manageable from a technical point of view.
That's what it's all about, that integration of the business and the technical.
It's really inspiring to see how all of these different roles come together to create this data-driven culture.
Yeah, it's about making the data work for everyone.
This has been so insightful. We've learned so much about the roles and responsibilities that keep data flowing smoothly.
And there's still more to come. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore even more about the fascinating world of data governance.
Welcome back, everyone. It's amazing to think about all the people involved in making data governance work, but we haven't really talked much about the actual tools they use.
That's true. You can have the best people, the best intentions, but without the right tools, it's going to be tough to really get a handle on your data.
So what kind of technology are we talking about here? What helps those data governors and stewards keep everything running smoothly?
Well, there's a whole world of data governance tools out there, but some of the most essential ones are things like data catalogs, data dictionaries, and data lineage tools.
Okay, let's break those down one by one. First up, data catalogs. Are those kind of like a library for data?
That's a really good way to think about it. A data catalog is basically a central repository of metadata. So data about data.
So just like a library catalog tells you where to find a specific book, a data catalog tells you where to find the data you need.
Exactly. It gives you this searchable index of all the data assets within an organization, along with all the key information, what the data means, where it came from, who's responsible for it, all of that.
That sounds incredibly helpful, especially for large organizations where data can be kind of scattered all over the place.
Absolutely. It really helps break down those data silos and makes that information accessible to everyone who needs it.
Makes sense. Now, how about data dictionaries? Are they similar to data catalogs?
Think of a data dictionary as a more focused version of a data catalog. So the catalog covers all the data assets, but the dictionary usually zeroes in on a specific data set or database.
So like a specialized encyclopedia for a particular subject.
Exactly. And it provides really detailed definitions of data elements, including, their data types, the formats they use, how they relate to other elements.
So it's kind of like a roadmap for understanding the structure and the meaning of a specific data set.
That's a great way to put it. And it's so essential for making sure that data is consistent and accurate. Imagine trying to analyze sales data, but you don't even know what customer lifetime value really means. A data dictionary gives you that clarity.
It seems like these data dictionaries would be especially useful for those business data stewards we talked about, the ones who are defining all those key business terms.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a crucial tool for them to create those clear definitions and make sure everybody's on the same page.
Okay, this is all starting to click into place now. Now, what about data lineage tools? What do they do?
Data lineage tools are all about tracing the journey of data. They help you understand where data comes from, how it's transformed along the way, and where it ultimately ends up.
So it's like a detective's case file, showing the complete history of a piece of data. That sounds really important for data quality and for compliance.
Exactly. If you know the full history of a piece of data, it's much easier to spot those potential sources of error or corruption.
I see. And if you're planning a system upgrade, for example, you could use those tools to understand how that upgrade might impact other systems that rely on that data.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding those dependencies and making sure you're not creating unintended consequences down the road.
This is fascinating. It's amazing to see how technology can support all those crucial human roles that we've been talking about.
It really is a powerful combination. The right tools in the right hands can really transform how an organization uses and manages data.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. The roles, the responsibilities, and now the technology behind it all. It's clear that data is an incredibly valuable asset.
Absolutely. And it needs to be treated that way. It's the foundation for better decisions, for innovation, for business success.
I hope our listeners are walking away from this with a clear understanding of how important data governance is.
It's an investment worth making, especially in today's world, where data is everything.
This has been such an insightful journey into the world of data governance. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing all of their knowledge.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. We'll see you next time.